If you were to go into a Russian church next Saturday, not this Saturday, because remember, Eastern Easter is often at a different time to Western Easter. This year, Eastern Easter is 1 week later. If you were to go into a Russian church next week, next Saturday, you might hear something like this. I'm going to try a little Church Slavonic. I've not tried it for many years, so I hope it's correct. Christos воскресе из мертвых, смертью смерть поправ, Иисусом в гробе даровав. I'll do the Greek version a little later. Next Saturday is the feast of the Anastasis, the feast of the Resurrection, which corresponds to the Western festival of Easter, and it begins in the evening. Now, I think the idea of resurrection is something which is embraced by all the three great religions, Judaism, Christianity and Islam. Indeed, in the Zohar, the author talks about the Academy of the Sky. It's the rabbis who have gone before us continue their debate, continue to learn. The idea of spirit, the idea that we have an articulate soul, you can find in Greek thought, in Plato, in Aristotle to a certain extent, but certainly in Plato, in Plotinus, and you can also find it in Indian thought, particularly in the traditions of the yoga. You can find it in the Sufi traditions. A vision of a life hereafter, a vision of a life which is beyond the body, which we can attain through meditation. This is a distinctive feature of Kabbalism. You can find it particularly in the writings of Abraham Abulafia, in the traditions of Abraham Abulafia. Think of the Prince of the Presence. Think of the intellect, the perfect mind. In Christian Orthodox theology, the union with the divine. Which I will talk about later in a later lesson about the idea of theosis. That's it on the board, theosis. The idea that the transcendent becomes immanent. The divine is manifested in the world. Resurrection is one of the 13 principles of faith talked about by the Rambam, by Maimonides. And is linked to the idea of the Olam Haba, the world to come. But you know, all of the traditions make it very clear this is not just about merit. This is not about merit at all, actually. The Mishnah particularly says, do not act like servants who only do things because they want a reward. The awe of heaven is on you now. The spiritual time is now. Think about it. It's so simple. If the eternal is present in the world, if the ever is here now, now is eternal. Now is the time. If we look at the Orthodox traditions in the East, the Church is separate but not of this world. There's a man called Hugo Ball. He's a very interesting man because he was the founder of the art movement, the absurdist art movement, Dada. He was a great sort of artistic intellectual at the end of the 19th century into the early 20th century. He died in 1927, I think. He talks about the invisible church because towards the end of his life he pretty well defined and was a leading figure in the development of Eastern Orthodoxy within the Western world. But all the things that he talks about in Dadaism, we may again look at this a little later, specifically at his writings and his link with religion. His traditions of abstract art, very much embraced by the Russian intelligentsia, and very much part of the traditions of early Russian art collection in the 20th century, and forms a backbone of the great Russian collections in Moscow, for example. This man talks about, he's talking about abstract art, the inability to make sense, and this really is a definition of our relationship with the divine. We have to go beyond the intellect, beyond what makes sense, and that's why I find the Orthodox tradition of the icon so invigorating. It's very much like meeting abstract 20th century art at its best. We're thinking of Matisse, of Picasso, of Kandinsky. Do check out the Kandinsky paintings of the Resurrection, where you've got the trumpet but so abstract, and it's very much sort of it's very much building on the traditions of iconography. Let's have a look at the icon. I'm going to try and make myself terribly small in the corner of the screen. It's a bit of sort of special effects. Look, here I go. I'm becoming terribly small. Now, here I'm going to draw for you on the board a version of the great icon of the anastasis of the resurrection. It's really an icon of the harrowing of hell, Christ coming down into hell and lifting up the dead into heaven. If you were to go into Istanbul and find the Kariya Jami, you go to the Patriarchate, you go up a little bit, you follow the Byzantine wall round, and there it is. There's this amazing fresco, which is precisely this scene of Jesus coming down from the cross and pulling out people from hell. Now let's have a look at this scene more accurately. This is very much based on two texts. One is 1 Peter 3:18-20. The long-suffering dead have waited for resurrection. And in the centre is Christ. And he's surrounded by the mandola, which represents the uncreated light. And particularly in traditions like the Novgorod school, the centre of this great halo of light is darker than the outside because of the unknown divinity that lies at the centre. God is unknown. We can know what God touches. We can know the light that emanates from God. We cannot know God himself. So often this leads to what is called apophatic theology, the theology where we are talking in the negative of what we cannot know. And by so doing, we might get some way to ascertaining what we can know. Christ is standing on the gates of hell, which have been broken. And underneath the gates of hell is a strange figure, Hades. Now, this goes back to the second text, which is the Gospel of Nicodemus, or the Acts of Pilate. And in that, Hades has a conversation with Satan. So sometimes in these icons you will see two figures, not one. But in this particular version, you've got Hades lying bound because of the triumph of Jesus over death. Now, in some Russian icons, later Russian icons, you will find a second stream. I'll see if I can find you a version, put it up here. A second tradition of Jesus leading the dead up a sort of staircase from hell, and right at the top in this particular icon you can see the good thief leading the way with his cross This day you will be with me in paradise, says Jesus from the cross. And right at the top, you can see the good thief being greeted by Enoch and Elijah and welcomed into paradise. On the one side of Jesus is Adam, and on the other side is Eve, the mother and father of humanity, being pulled up into paradise too, being pulled out of the tombs. The translation of that prayer that I sang at the beginning is, Christ is risen from the dead, trampling death by death. That's the broken doors and all the keys to all the padlocks which have locked the dead in hell up to that point. And to those in the tombs, he is giving life. Should we do this in Greek? Because it's a language I'm a little bit more familiar with. So, Christos anesti ek nekron, thanato thanaton patisas, ketis entis mnemazi, zoin charis amenos. So on the one side you've got Adam, and behind Adam you can see Kings David and Solomon. You can see John the forerunner, John the Baptist. On the other side you've got this amazing person with a crook, a shepherd's crook, and he is Abel, as in Cain and Abel. And behind him, just above, you can often see the three young men who survived in the fiery furnace in Daniel chapter 3. So what you and then you've got these sort of mountains arising. Sometimes they look like look like the jaws of a great crocodile, and into these jaws goes Jesus to rescue the people who have fallen before his death. So that is a brief summary. It is very brief, I'm so sorry, of the meaning of the icon of the anastasis, the icon of the resurrection. And I hope I put it into a wider context, if that's possible. I hope I haven't caused any offence. And anyway, this speedily, because I want to get these talks out before Western Easter. This is Tim, and please come back for more next time. Thank you very much.